So does anyone have any questions or anything they'd like to hear from? And Ray can certainly chat too, but.
How'd you feel about the Obama speech?
You mean the idea for the? I went to a lecture at the Penn Museum a couple of years ago, and there was a woman there named Joanne Van Tilburg, who has done a lot of research about the Routledge expedition in 1914, 1915, and I had never heard anything about it, and it's one of those things that you sort of realize, wow, this is a heck of a story. So let me file it away, and when I have some time, I'd like to kind of play around with it and see what's there dramaturgically. So.
And their relationship, like, what's the truth in their relationship, and what is fictional, and what?
It's a great question. You read about them and speculate, and we do know that Scoresby left her there for some time. We went back to Chile. She was there alone for about 4 months. It's pretty clear on the way out that they had a significant disagreement. So there was tension in the relationship. I think a lot of it had to do with the money. I think a lot of it had to do with her sense of having been, sort of purchased, being an investment. I think that must have been very real. And after they got back, they did publish jointly, and the relationship, nevertheless, kind of continued to deteriorate. He tried to sort of take care of her, but more as a friend, I think, and less as a husband. And she just became more difficult, really, to do that when she was finally institutionalized. So, the facts are there, and one of the things you do, obviously, is try to get in and shape them in such a way that you have something that's compelling dramatically in terms of the action of the story.
Well, yeah, I was curious about what facts were there specifically surrounding the character of Percy. He was just so rich. I mean, they were all such richly written characters. One of the things I really enjoyed about the piece is because sometimes you can see historical pieces that are really just sort of talky, and this was really character-driven. One of the things I loved about it. But I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on the development of the character of Percy.
Yeah, Percy's interesting. He's the one about whom the least is known.
Yeah.
You can find information about Scoresby and Catherine especially.
Yeah.
Percy was there. He was doing his job. He did have some sort of a relationship with the young native girl on the island, and he was recalled. And that's kind of about it.
Right. What was his job exactly?
Kind of, it's like, what wasn't his job?
Right.
He was sent out as Williamson and Balfour's man to manage the livestock. But while he was there, he became port captain. He kind of became government representative, and it was also promiscuous what he was up to. And then with the massacre of the animals, this was interpreted as an insurrection back in Chile, so they demanded that he be sent home. But beyond that, there's not much. And I was sort of surprised in the writing of the play because Percy, I was most concerned about him. I felt like I needed 3 characters, and I was sort of, what's he going to be all about as you're trying to put the story together? And then he was just kind of got away from me a little bit. He sort of kind of took over in that weird way that characters can do sometimes.
In a great way. Yeah. Well, actually, what was the duration of time that they were on the island?
They got there in March of 1914, and they left. Percy was recalled first.
Right.
They were there without him for some time, but the 2 of them, Scoresby and Catherine, left together in July of 1915. So it was a little over a year.
What did they end up finding out about the island?
The most important thing that she found out had to do with that site, Orongo, at the top of the volcano, which was really a site that no one had ever looked at before. And she was the one who discovered the cult practices that were probably, being enacted or performed there. But beyond that, I think it was more a question of sort of discovering what questions to ask. You know what I mean? Like rather than the answers, because she really came away with precious few answers, I think. But you know, I think taught subsequent scholars, I suppose, sort of what to look at, maybe, and what questions to ask, because she seems to have really felt that she had failed in some profound way, you know, that she hadn't been able to figure out what happened with the soil, she hadn't been able to figure out how to translate the language, she hadn't really been able to make complete sense even of the Orongo site. So, I mean, I think that she really felt burdened by the failure of the expedition, but there were reasonable successes too that I think became apparent after later scholars got a chance to work with that she had uncovered.
When Scoresby mentioned that you know, he knew less when he was leaving than when he got there. It was interesting.
Yeah.
So what happened to Scoresby after she was committed, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And then she died in the war.
She died in the 30s. Yeah, she was diagnosed as a paranoid schizophrenic. And he just sort of kind of continued that life, you know, that's all those sort of perambulations. And he did go to Jamaica, and he did not succeed, you know. And he eventually died in the 60s, I think, on Cyprus. He never remarried.
Ray, talk a little bit about the differences between this process and versus, you know, when you discovered when you were writing Maroons.
Well, one of the things that attracted me a lot about turning to this, after having written the Maroons play about the Pottsville Maroons football team in the 1920s, was that the challenges were so different. I mean, with Maroons, it's kind of about this huge story with all of these people, and you know, trying to move them around almost like characters on a chessboard, and just making sure that there's a kind of coherence. And with this, the challenges I think had to do with limitations. You know, a limited number of people in a small space, and allowing that sense of claustrophobia, emotional claustrophobia, you know, spiritual claustrophobia to kind of work on them. You know, so it was maybe more of an internal, sort of interior kind of story, fewer incidents, maybe, you know, than the Maroons.
How long did it take you to, or when did you start, and when did you feel like, okay, I think I'm gonna. And did you guys read through this first, and then did you do any revisions?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we had a reading in the spring, and then based on the reading, I kind of went back and kind of continued to work on some things. But I would say, from starting the actual writing, you know, it's probably maybe like, I don't know, maybe 4 months.
Mm. Would you ever go there?
I'd love to go, but boy, it's a long trip.
Yeah. And what do you know about these Moai now? Like, what do we know?
That's a good question. I mean, one of the things that's interesting about Easter Island is that sort of every generation sort of sees something different, kind of sees a reflection of itself, you know. There's some new ideas about how they might have been carved and how they might have been moved and how they might have been placed. Actually, that Joanne Van Tilburg woman who I mentioned earlier is sort of in the vanguard of a lot of these theories. But I mean, I think that they're theories, and I don't know about any sort of definitive answers. I still think like a lot's up for grabs.
Yeah, I mean, I did see that this year that they was it this year that they found that they have full bodies.
They have full bodies,
Yeah,
right? This is in the article that you had handed me.
Yeah, I read it recently.
Yeah.
It's just like, what? You know, that's,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Fascinating. All right.
Ray, you threaded news of World War I throughout the play. Did World War I have any actual impact on their work, or was that just kind of setting the context for the time period?
Well, the Germans did actually come to Easter Island for provisions, you know, for beef and mutton. But I think I was more interested in the way in which, you know, the collapse of one civilization sort of reflects the collapse of another civilization, right? I mean, they're here to study this Rapa Nui culture that mysteriously collapsed, and isn't this sort of interesting from a scholarly point of view, from a kind of disinterested anthropological point of view, but oh, guess what's happening back home?
Mhm.